Let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the award-winning podcast where we talk about gaining, fetishism, and everything plus size. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're welcoming back to the show an absolute icon and legend. We got Phil back with us.
Pleasure to be here, guys.
Phil, how are you, my love?
I am doing well, thank you. I am loving the cooler weather. It's, as a fat boy, it's always nice when we leave summer and chance to wear sweaters and not sweat out the day, although that's not always a horrible thing, but I love autumn, so I'm glad for the change.
Yes.
I am grateful to be more resistant to cold these days. Like when it hits the deep freeze, that still bothers me, but you know, a good like 30 degrees, 40 degrees can totally handle. Like on the weekends, I do a second job where I do home health care visits, and everybody has got their heat cranked. And like, I'm just, as you see, I'm just wearing a thermal because this is honestly all I need to go outside. But then I walk into their houses and I'm just pouring sweat as I'm trying to do my job.
Oh, goodness. You know, even though I've been in the UK for about 7 years now, you know what? Like, winter as like an actual cold season is a very new thing for me. It's more of a wet season in Oz, and obviously it happens at a different point in the year. So living in a place where, you know, December time, November time means Christmas and winter and snowflakes is actually quite like it's nice. Bit different for me. But Phil, my love, this is a wonderful opportunity for us, we've got to say, because something that we want to start doing with the pod, where we have opportunity to do so, is a little bit of a reflection series on some of our members who have been in the game for a number of years, people who have been an incredible influence on the community, and just people who I think have a lot to share. And today is all about you, my love. So listen, are we ready? What's that show? This Is Your Life, a little bit?
Yes, yes.
Are we ready to get into it, my love?
I think so. I think I'm as ready as I can be.
Wonderful. Well, listen, let's start off at the very beginning. When did you first start your gaining journey?
Wow. Well, I can say, even as a child growing up, I dreamed about gaining. I would sit in the shower with the shower curtain and hold up the shower curtain and let it fill up and pretend it was like a belly. And I must have been 3 or 4 years old, maybe 5. So I have dreamed about gaining from the very, very earliest ages. But actually, when I started gaining, it was around 1990. And I was about 160 pounds and 24 years old. And I had just moved into a house with 2 guys who were members of ACT UP LA. This is back in the early days of HIV activism. And I had just tested HIV positive. And they folded me into this amazing group of people to help me see life from a different angle, taking a phrase from Lacage. And they said, you know, if you want to get fat, just get fat. What's stopping you? And I just needed that permission to think, oh, is it that simple? Just start eating. And they said, go and get your favorite foods and we'll wait here for you. I went shopping, came back, and they were so happy to see me embark on this journey now that I had permission to just eat what I want. And I figured, well, if I was going to die before I was 30, which is what the kind of expectation was back in those days, I thought, then I want to go out on my own terms and have the body that I've always wanted. So a little while ago, what is that, 30 plus years or so?
I won't say what I was doing in the year 1990. I feel like that perhaps takes a little bit away from the theme of today's episode.
You would have been in, I mean, when were you even born yet?
I was born in 1992, so the joke
Okay,
there is like I was
you
not,
weren't even there.
I was not alive when Phil began his gaining journey. No.
Well, I
No,
mean,
so-
you know, it kind of makes me feel, I mean, I don't know. Does it make me feel old? I was in 3rd grade in 1990, so.
You know, I feel like I just have the gift of longevity. I think many of us, given the chance to live into your late 50s and 60s and so on, you accumulate knowledge and experience. I just feel lucky that I'm still here to be able to just share the things that I've learned. I mean, I've had such an incredible time with so many brilliant and witty and creative men that I gleaned and observed and imitated and incorporated aspects that I just found so admirable in all of those around me. And I just feel like I'm an agglomeration of all of these incredible people that I've known and that have influenced my life. And I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that I'm still here to be able to share, what I've learned and share some of that institutional knowledge, of back before the internet, what it was like trying to connect with people, like back in the early 90s, it was tough to find other gainers. You were lucky if you lived in, like I did in, LA, where I had access to people. People migrated to LA, I was 18 years old when I was involved with Girth and Mirth. And I was lucky. I was at my first full-time job in LA at a fashion clothing store. And I was talking to this one elderly gay coworker and telling him that, and I was very thin at the time. I weighed like, 160. And I said, I just love fat boys and I can't find them anywhere. And he said, well, there's a group that you should go to. It's called Girth and Mirth. And the next day he came in and gave me a newspaper clipping from the local gay rag and said, call this number. And I did. And I felt like that was just the entree into a world I didn't know existed. There was an actual club. And then at my first meeting, I was talking to one of the leaders of the group, and he said, when I told him what I liked, he said, I have someone you need to talk to. And he took me by the hand and introduced me to my first gainer mentor. And his name was Nathan. And Nathan and I dated for years. And it was an amazing experience to meet this, not too much older, but this gentleman who said, there's a community of people just like us. And I'm going to make sure you get connected. And he's actually the one that connected me to Encouragement newsletter when it first started. But I just feel so lucky that along my journey, I have met people who literally have taken me by the hand and exposed me to the early individuals who got our community going. And I feel incredibly lucky to have had that.
And speaking of those fabled Girth and Mirth meetups, they're kind of they've become something of a legend because people from the millennial and Gen Z generation most likely had never attended that. And so, can you explain what was a typical Girth and Mirth meetup like?
Sure. So I was part of two. I was part of Girth and Mirth LA and then Girth and Mirth Long Beach. We would get together once a month at a local bar, and usually they were bear or leather bars. For Girth and Mirth Long Beach, we were at a place called Pistons, which now is known as Falcon North, and it's in North Long Beach. Great bar with a big patio, and we would have beer bus, where we would walk around with pitchers of beer. People would pay an entrance fee at the door, and we just label it as a safe place for chubs and chasers or anyone who's an admirer of fat men to get together and meet. And it was really, Girth and Mirth started, I think, even before the bear movement was around. And so they both kind of came into being around the same time. You were a chub or you were a bear at the beginning. There wasn't a lot of crossover. Of course, that has changed, but it was a great place to be able to meet fat boys or guys who were into fat boy. This safe environment to be able to just know that you were all there for the same reason. You wanted to connect. And it was thriving. Girth and Mirth Long Beach, I think, was the most successful Girth and Mirth group of the era. We hosted many what was called West Coast conferences, which are like, big giant Grommr. And they were national events called convergences that were held annually. And they were all part of what was called the affiliated big men's clubs, the ABC clubs. And the convergences were amazing, where people from across the country, very much like Bigger Vegas is now, where anyone who was into fat showed up, for a long 3-day weekend filled with an orgy room, and the pool and, big dinners. And it was an incredible experience to know that the whole world, people from other countries came to convergences, as I think they do now to a lot of the events. But it felt like the beginning of something just incredible, to be able to know that you're all there to meet, and very safe, and people established lifelong friendships from those very, very early days. It was a lot of fun.
And when you reflect on the 90s as a whole, how would you describe the community of the decade? Because I think for many of us who have grown up exclusively in the internet era, we can think of usernames and platforms and all sorts, but back then, I imagine that it would have been very much about who was able to arrive in a space and what that space could even contain in terms of resources for people. So please share with us, more broadly speaking, what was the gainer community of the 90s like?
Well, it was small, and it was growing. Every big gathering, we started with the encourage cons, is what we called them back in the day. And there were, 20 or 30 guys that would come nationwide. The encouragement newsletter had been going out. I forget when the first issue went out, but it was in the 90s as well. And we waited for that bi-monthly newsletter to see who else has joined the community, writing in letters. I met one of my first gainer boyfriends via that newsletter, and it was just to know that you were talking to someone else who wanted to get fat, someone who wanted to fatten you. It was never enough. And when we would get together for these annual events, to be able to know that you all had the same desire, that it was not shunned upon. Even at the convergences, the girth and mirth groups, the gainers had to be on the lowdown a little bit, because it was so so frowned upon. Wanting to get fatter, still, even within that big supportive environment, being a gainer was really frowned upon. It was not something that was overtly welcomed. You had to kind of whisper, "I want to get fat," to someone else, to see how they felt about it. And when there was a connection, it was like an explosion, fireworks went off. So when we got to the Encourage cons, to know we all had that same desire, it was incredible. And word spread, people invited other people to join. And it was just this freedom to know that if I said I wanted to be 600 pounds, and to have someone rub my belly and say, let's make that happen, that feeling, those words, even beyond just, gainer sex, it was just such an affirmation of, I'm not alone. There are others here who share this desire. And, it was so welcoming and less isolating. And those bonds really survived throughout the years. I met some of my current friends now that, we met way back when. There was one individual from Canada who had journeyed to the Encourage Con, I believe it was in 93, from the Russian River area. I had written in one of the newsletters about my experiences, and he showed up and he said, I came all the way from Canada just to meet you. And I said, well, that is so nice. And he hugged me for about 10 minutes. And I thought, okay, thank you. But I could see it in his eyes. He just wanted to connect, this earnest desire just to know that he wasn't alone. They were quite magical times. I love those early events.
We've said it before, but we'll say it again. Oftentimes, like when you get to meet with another gainer or encourager or anyone in the community who is part of this world, it feeds the soul in a way that I don't think people really understand. Like, it means that you don't have to try and explain anything to the other person. They know what you're about. They know what you're into. They know what you like. They know the things that make you happy and bring you joy, and that's such a relief. And we do our research over on this podcast. So I actually wanted to ask you about a big ad article back from 1992 where you quote Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Do you feel any particular connection with that book in your gaining journey?
Hugely, yes. Where can I begin? Transformation. For me, Alice is all about transformation. And as a kid, literally as a like 5, 6-year-old kid, I would in my bedroom, I would take a sleeping bag and crawl into it thinking I was going down the rabbit hole. And then I would get turned around and I'd get stuck. And I would yell for my mom and she would come in and, "Are you playing Alice in Wonderland again?" It was it was a connection I've had with Alice since I was a child. And as I got older, seeing that connection with, growing bigger, growing smaller, that just has always stuck with me. And so, yeah, I have this affinity for the story in terms of, where am I going to go? Am I out of control? What's going to happen to me as I get bigger? So absolutely, very, very much a connection, and a lovely connection that I am very proud to have.
As a macrophile, I can understand why it has a particular interest. I think it spawned quite a few macrophiles over the years.
I think so, yeah.
In the article, you also mentioned, and you've actually referenced it already here in this episode, that you had a mentor who encouraged your gains. These individuals that you got to connect with, and you've expressed a sense of how that really informed that initial part of your journey and helped you to move through a lot of those initial hurdles. Do you feel that sense of mentorship is something missing in the community these days?
Well, yes and no. Um, yes, in that there doesn't seem to be that much of a mentorship going on now. There's so much access to the gainer world through various different medias, and I don't know if people are looking for that as much on one hand, and then on the other, I think that there's always going to be in the gainer community or in the gay world in general, like a daddy-son relationship going on. I think there's always the desire for a younger person wanting the guidance and holding of hands from someone older to lead them. I see that as just this ongoing connection now that I'm older. There's younger guys that reach out to me and they're looking for that kind of connection. I even have one boyfriend in the middle of sex, say dad. I'm like, okay, well, I know that desire is there. So I think the gay world takes care of its own in terms of that kind of searching for a father figure or looking to mentor someone. But I don't see it as much as I did, say, like 30 years ago.
We actually talked about mentorship a long time ago, like back in season 2, I think. And we had talked about, the HIV epidemic and how we lost so many people to it. And like they would, be in their late 50s, early 60s. And it's just like we felt that like the lack of mentorship came from this, because like millennial gays, we're getting older now, and we don't have a ton of people to look to that are older than us. And so we start to be like floundering a bit, and we're like, okay, well, how do we even carve out our own place in society? And then how can we help the millennials that are younger than us and the Gen Z queers to figure out their place in the world? At least I can say that I feel pretty good about the Gen Z kids. I think they're going to be okay. I'm not so sure about us millennials sometimes.
I've seen that, and I agree. I like to have this melioristic hope that desire, that yearning for a father figure, for mentoring. I see that continuing. I don't know if that's ever really gone away fully. I think there's always going to be the desire for some younger guys to pursue that kind of relationship. So a lot of our community don't have that kind of nurturing mentorship from their biological father. So I see guys yearning and reaching out for someone older to take guys under their wing. And being a little bit older, I appreciate that. And I try and provide that to anyone who really wants to pursue, a friendship. I feel this desire to kind of give back in that way. And I hope that continues, that reciprocal desire stays alive in our community.
Now, we did have something outlined for a documentary that you were a part of that happened, I believe, in 1993 called Bears and Chubs. Now, full disclosure, when we first talked about this, we'd done some research online. We couldn't find much of anything, so we thought, we'll ask a couple of questions and that'll be that. And when we brought this up to you, you had said, now wait a minute, because I might know someone who might have something to do with this. And, it was Ben Stone's widower, Andrew, who you'd reached out to. And Andrew had a box of Ben's old stuff and then rifled through the box and found the old tapes, the tapes from the 90s that weren't that easy to digitize, but found a place that they could digitize it, digitized it into a digital file, uploaded it to YouTube, and now we have a brand new documentary that involves gainers and a younger version of yourself that we can watch. So full disclosure here, y'all, we're going to do a separate episode all about this documentary. It's going to be a review. It's going to be cute. So I'm not going to talk about it too much here. However, Phil, my love, what was this documentary about?
Well, Ben wanted to do a documentary about bears and about gainers because in the early 90s, again, things were so new and a lot of people didn't know what being a bear meant. And of course, no one had heard about gainers. I mean, we'd want to get fat. So, he asked me, can I come film you, for a week, live with you, follow you to a family event and your work and interview your friends? And of course, the young me said, sure, why not? And so he arrived with his camera crew and stayed with me for a week and followed me around. I mean, he followed me to the grocery store, to my family dinner, to my job, and talked to my coworkers. And, looking back now, I think, oh, I would never do that now. But, the younger me was all too happy to have that experience. And I'm glad that I did. I was so honored that he wanted to do that and to be part of that. And it was shown at, and we'll get into it when we actually get to that future episode, but it showed at the Gay and Lesbian Film Festivals in New York, San Francisco, and LA. And so it was kind of like being thrown out there. And I love it. I love that people saw it. People got to know what being a bear meant, what being a chub meant, and what a gainer was. So a lot of fun, but again, not something I'm sure I would be so open to in this day and time, especially my work. Oh my God. Having them talk to my coworkers and my boss about, what do you think about Philip being fat? And I don't think that segment made it into this. I think it's like a 25 minute short. The documentary never got finished. I think all the footage was put together, but Ben fell ill. And so all that we have is this introductory documentary short, but very proud to be part of that part of history.
Now, this documentary was directed by John Alcalt, which I feel like not enough people know who this man was. This man was a queer man of color who was very instrumental in shaping the community. And it's sad to me that there are I would say that probably the majority of people in the gainer community have no idea, none whatsoever. Can you please explain or, describe what John was like and what it was like to work with a man who was just such a pillar of shaping the early days of the gainer community, pre-internet?
John was a dynamic individual. And for people who are listening to this podcast, John's pseudonym was Ben Stone. John was a mover and a shaker. And, he put together the encouragement newsletter, funded it, out of his own pockets. Never asked for money. People can obviously donate, but he wanted to create a community of gainers and encouragers. And, he put together the Encourage Cons, which are the first national get-togethers for gainers and encouragers. And people paid whatever they could afford. If they couldn't afford it, He made sure that they were still able to attend. You don't meet a lot of individuals like that anymore. People who are willing to put their own dollar out to make something happen, to make this community happen. And he knew what he wanted, and he knew who to talk to. He networked. He was a visionary. And the fact that he was a Black man been maneuvering in this society, making changes, it was so lovely to see that he broke down barriers on so many levels, in so many ways. And to be his friend, I was honored. When he was ill, I flew to New York to see him in the hospital right before he passed away. And the experience that he gave to me, the opportunity to be able to have a voice at the beginning of this community, I'm grateful. But he was truly dynamic. And I will say, he really knew what he wanted, and he had a vision, as most do. This is how it's going to be. And there were those that maybe didn't appreciate his own vision, but he made it happen. So I learned a lot about what it takes to create community from John.
Bless John Outcolt, Ben Stone, for having done what he did. And a huge thank you to people like you. Shout out to Moshe Cube, who shared information with us as well, to elder statesmen who've informed us and given us an idea of who these people are, because, Tim, you're absolutely right. We had no knowledge of this. You just sort of shrug and go, I presume something happened, and I presume people were fine because we made it to where we are today. But this is
But
why...
just like in the wider gay community, don't forget where we came from. Don't forget that the struggle has always been there. Don't forget who was actually the ones that got the Stonewall thing kicked off. Don't forget who was laying down in the streets in San Francisco in protest of HIV. And like, just don't forget that stuff. It's really easy to do when you see the Pride Parade go by and people are dancing around in tutus and jock straps. It's really easy to forget how hard of a struggle it was to get to that point.
And really,
Very
why I
true.
think this is important for us to do, to highlight and to speak and to understand this is our history and this is the truth of it. To which point, I would love to be able to do an episode on John specifically someday. So, Andrew, I understand he is your deceased partner. If you would like to come on and speak with us, Phil, if you'd like to come back, and anyone who knew him, if you wish to come on and we'll have a conversation about what this man managed to achieve, I think that would be fabulous to honor him and the incredible things that he was able to do in our community. But coming back to you, my dear, Chubs and Bears was not the only documentary you did in the 90s. You also did one called Hollywood Sex. Now, unfortunately, we looked for this one. Unfortunately, we weren't able to find anything about it. We reached out to the BBC people to see if they've got things on the servers, on the hard drives. Nothing that we could locate, unfortunately. So, Hollywood Sex. What was the documentary about, my dear?
Oh my. And I will say, I had a copy of it, but when we purged in one of our moves, I got rid of all of my VHS tapes. And along with that went that only copy that I had. So the BBC reached out to John Outcolt and said, we want to do a documentary. And at that point, I don't think John was doing too well. And he said, I'm going to put you in touch with someone I know on the West Coast. And they said, oh, that's perfect, because we want to do one about Hollywood sex. And so the BBC arrived in 1994 and interviewed me with two of my friends who were not gainers or encouragers. They wanted just gainers. And none of my friends who were gainers in LA wanted to be part of it. They thought, I do not want to be on TV. And so I had one of my very, very lovely fat friends named Hank, and another friend of mine who was just a coworker and kind of a bear. And so he said, okay, I'll be an encourager. And my friend Hank said, I'll play a gainer. And so the BBC descended on my little apartment with bags and bags of food. And they said, we want you to have a tea party and talk about being fat. And so we did. So we sat around a table and we were eating, having great conversation, in the middle of which they halted the filming and they said, stop, and they said, "You are not eating enough. We came to see you eat. We want to see you eat." So they cut away half of the cake and, made it look like we had demolished this table. And they said, "This is what we want. This is what people want to see." And action. And so they made it seem like we were just being more piggy than we were. They had zoomed in on our mouths as we were eating, and they said, "Show us the food on the outside of your mouth. We want to see you moaning and groaning and feeding each other." And I thought, okay, you are here for the spectacle. And at the end, our little segment, and we were with about 10 other segments, different vignettes. Our segment opened up with the elephant walk music that you would hear in a circus. My friends walking to the front of my apartment, and through the whole background of our segment was that same elephant walking music. And I thought, okay, you were just about spectacle. But the funniest follow-up to that, my friend Hank, who very much in the business world, in the insurance world, he was at an airport somewhere in the Midwest, and there was a man with a family at the restaurant they were at in the airport watching him. And at one point, the man got up and walked over to him. And my friend Hank thought, "Oh my God, I hope this isn't related to that documentary." And the man was from England, and he said, "Excuse me, but aren't you on the tele?" And my friend Hank said, "What?" And he said, "I saw you on the tele. You were eating cake on the tele." And my friend Hank said, he was with his coworkers. "I don't know who you are. You must mistake me for someone else." And got up and walked away. And then he called me and he said, "You won't believe what happened to me." And so anyway, that was my experience with the BBC.
First of all, several things that need to be addressed. Phil, I would like you to once again do your British accent.
I don't know how horrible it was. I am horrible at that.
No, it was marvelous. I've said this to Tim before. I think there are only two types of accents and/or impressions that you can do. It either needs to be spot on, indistinguishable from the real thing, or it needs to be gutter bucket, absolutely terrible. So could you just give me a very quick, "It's Tuesday, innit?"
It's Tuesday, innit?
Oh, that
Close.
was great. That was good. No, that was delightful. Listen, I feel compelled to share a little bit about my experience when I filmed Sex Actually with Alice Levine, because in a similar scenario, they had come to my home to film some shots with food, me getting dressed up, rah-de-rah. In that instance, it was just me there. But they didn't bring me no food. I had to buy the food myself. And because I was making, like, it was potato and leek soup, right? Like, it was very basic. Like, I had to basically be, like, most of the way done with it by the time they rocked up. They just wanted to get the shots of, like, me pouring cream into the pot, serving it up in the bowl, having food on the couch, and, like, yeah. So, maybe... Maybe they've learned, mind you, it was Channel 4, not BBC, so like private, not public, but still, like that was one of my major questions going into it because they hit me up on Instagram being like, "Listen, we're looking to do this thing. We saw your profile.
Wow.
Would you be interested in having a conversation with us?" I grilled them. I didn't even say like a hello back. I was straight up like, "No, hi. You're messaging me and I know why. Tell me what your thoughts are on this immediately or I will not respond to you again." And bless them, they were very like, "Oh, well, we actually understand that. We've reached out to a few people and done some research, and we can see that other documentarians have not handled your community with grace, so we appreciate the level of pushback that's coming off here." And then they spoke, and then I said, "Okay, I'll meet you for a drink, and we'll talk." And then I met them for a drink, and I grilled them while we were having a drink. And again, bless them, they were like, "No, it's okay." So I would like to think that that means that there has been some improvement overall in how documentarians might handle sensitive subjects in the media.
I would hope so. Love that.
And if I can take it back to like the earlier days of the internet, all the way back to Gainer Web, you did an interview for the old Gainer Web website, and you talked about how you used to body mold before you started gaining. What inspired the initial approach to body modification?
I think I've always been interested in how we can modify our bodies as we desire. I back in even in the Big Ad days, Big Ad was a monthly or quarterly magazine that primarily had ads where you can, talk to other people about wanting to get fat or wanting to, find a chaser. And I had met this individual who was interested in gaining, but he was also very successful in modifying his own body. He had pec implants, and he also had genital enhancements. And I thought, oh my God, that is fascinating. I mean, what gay guy has not ever, looked into, genital modification, vacuum pumping, fantasizing about being bigger. And then I meet this individual that had this circus-sized, groin, set of bloated genitals. And he lived in San Diego. So I went to go see him just because, well, why not? And he said, we can get you bigger down there too. And I said, really? And so on his living room, I started my modification process. And he said, there's also a doctor in Tijuana that can continue if you want. And so I ended up finding this doctor. And so I found that modification in the Gano world, there's some crossover into people who want to get silicone enhancements and have done so, to various degrees, to extreme sizes. And I think that just oftentimes that kind of goes hand in hand into what else can I grow bigger? What else can I transform? What are the parts of my body can I enhance? Whether it's giant ass implants or circus size, chest implants or basketball size testicles. It's just, the thing is, once you do it, then it's something you got to live with, and, you got to go to work, and what kind of pants am I going to wear to hide this thing? And when you're 700 pounds, how hard is it going to be to get into the office? So, enhancements in any way with your body comes with that, what happens, the day after. But, for many of us, that is part of the allure in terms of having to now modify my life to accommodate what the hell I've done to my body, and the permanence of it. I think is the other part of it. It's like, oh my God, this is so permanent. It's so wonderful. It's so awful. I love it. That's my spiel on that. But, the Gainer Web interview was interesting. That was, the internet was so new. And some of the guys that, from the encouragement community said, we're going to put this website on the internet and we want to interview 3 people. They interviewed one of my friends who actually became my boyfriend, Massive Mike, Jim the Fat, and then myself. And we were the first 3 people interviewed for Gainer Web. And we gave our email addresses out. I didn't even have an email address at that early state of the internet. And a lot of people saw these interviews, and I got emails for years from guys, wanting to connect, like, oh my God, this is real. There are real people doing this. And it was, again, one of these amazing periods of history where, being thrust into the spotlight just because we were there, and helping spread the word, letting people know, yeah, we're here. Yeah, this is real. Yeah, you can do this. It was a great time.
Oh my goodness. It really takes me back to, again, I probably shouldn't say the age that I was. Too young. I'll say that to have been looking at what I was looking at. But, I remember Gainer Web. That was my first forum that I was ogling. And I shared this on the Warren Davis series we did for YouTube, right? Like, that's where I uncovered those stories, that artwork that really inspired a lot of my early fantasies. But, those types of interviews also really stick out to me. I remember one with Fat Pen Plus and with Get Bigger that really just solidified in my mind. It's not just that this is fantasy, that this is real, that people are really doing this, and that there is some kind of a narrative happening out here. So truly, from an observer and now doer to yourself, like, your work has been so impactful, and it really does register with a lot of people. And again, premise of today is to give you some flowers for, in many ways for you, it may have just been, I was just showing up, I was just doing whatever, but actually it changed lives forever. And we are all of us so very thankful for you.
Oh, you are too sweet. Thank you.
Well, to that point, and I'm going to say in this interview, many questions of that were focused on your journey of where you were then and projections of where you might grow next. And obviously, it's been a good 20 years since then, but like, how do you feel your idea of your journey has manifested versus the way you envisioned it at the time?
I knew that my life had to focus around fat to a certain extent. I was so drawn to it. I mean, as we all are, and not just drawn to it, like compulsively craving it. Let's not, kid around that. The desire that we have, it is all consuming. It is it is like the core heartbeat of our desire that pulses through our bodies, throughout every day. And no matter how far you try and run from it, it is right there, right behind you. It never goes away. Many of us try and deny that. So I knew I wanted to be involved somehow in the fat world. I just didn't know, how that was going to manifest. In terms of my career, I stayed in social work because I felt a grounding, helping people, that part of my soul that needed to give back to community somehow. But on the flip side of that, this hedonistic craving to just be a blob, they're opposite ends of the spectrum there. Let me help you get food at a food bank and give me all the food you have. I need it now. But I've made it work. I've somehow made that balance work. And then when I got older and I went back to school, got my MFA, and my first novel was about fat. And it should be no coincidence that my entry into the literary world was writing a dystopic novel about fat people and the desire to be fat and being repressed, not being able to get fat enough. So I feel like I've been able to feed that need to stay involved in our community, but taking it to new areas. I look at the gainers now on active social media that are, have income through OnlyFans and making it work. Those individuals who are too fat to go in for work, but are still able to have a career and support themselves through OnlyFans. I think that media, I'm so glad that exists because it lets someone who is 700 pounds and wants to be bedbound have an income. I mean, thank God that's available now. If that was available in the 90s, I'd probably be 2,000 pounds, but it was not available back in the day. So I write about it, and I'm not the 25-year-old. I would not be able to have an OnlyFans page supporting, myself, as I'm approaching 60 next year. Yes, I said 60. And so I'm glad to be able to be part of it, from this angle anyway, to be able to write about it, to be able to talk about it, to share experiences. And I really think for those in our community, continue doing what you're doing. I think it's what we have available to us today is an amazing thing. These, financing vehicles to be able to support yourself while you're 700 or 800 pounds, I think is a perfect modality for supporting yourself as a supersized fatty, being part of that. But also possibly look at what else can I do? What other gifts do I have? What other things do I have that I might be able to contribute somehow to society to, explore other talents that I have. I think, we're all capable of being more than one thing, and our talents or our skills are not, it's not an extreme of, I can only be fat. Well, you can be fat and do something else if you want. You just need to find a way to do that. If you're an artist, if you have other areas of interest, explore those at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive. Being a supersized fatty, you can live well at 700 pounds and have a healthy income and pursue all of your skills. It doesn't just have to be about the next cheeseburger, although the next cheeseburger is certainly on my mind right now. So you can have your cake and eat it too and explore your talents. But, I feel lucky that I've been able to somehow make it all work. And maybe the next goal would be to hit 600 pounds. I don't know. But, there's always that joy and that hope and desire to make that happen.
In that interview, you also mentioned that you're a chaser first and a gainer second. Do you think that that still applies to you today?
You have done your research. That still applies, yes. I actually thought about that recently. I have dated encouragers, and I've dated, obviously my fat boys. That desire is always there, that primary desire of wanting to be with a fat boy, to make love to the folds. I think it's a craving that never goes away, and thank God it does not ever go away. That is always there. It reminds me of my passion, my desire. What I find most beautiful. So absolutely, I still hold to that chaser first, gainer second.
I identify with that. I think it's the same for me too, because my initial attraction to fat wasn't on myself, it was on others, you know? So like
Mhm.
I'm always going to, I think, be like, either the opportunity, like if it was the opportunity to like play around with like a super chub or get fed, I think I'm still going to pick playing around with the super chub first.
I have to agree. I have to agree with that. You know,
Mm. Yeah, a chaser first mentality. I wonder how many more of us actually align with that more than being like gainer first. But if you're out there, if you're a gainer first or a chaser first, write into us at thiccradio@gmail.com and let us know where you fall on that. But another thing that I think would be good to bring up here is your sense of activism. And something that you and I have actually talked about in the past is the idea of the quote unquote good fatty versus the quote unquote bad fatty. And I'd love it if you could explain what these mean to the listeners and how they inform your approach to activism.
absolutely. So the good fatty, bad fatty is something that has been written about in many different venues. The good fatty is typically someone who does all they can. They eat healthy foods, they exercise, they look at losing weight to be healthy. They follow all the guidelines to make them the honorable fatty. Look at that person, even though they're fat, they're still out there walking, they're still out there, they're having their salads. That is the good kind of person we want in our society. Someone who tries to be healthy, and even though they might not be, smaller, that they're doing what they can to be a good person. And then there's the bad fatty who eats the greasy hamburgers, who has dessert, who does not follow a diet, who does everything wrong and goes against society ideals. And dare they say they even like being fat. So that is the bad fatty. And that is something that I think is wrestled with a lot, whether they're gainers or civilian fatties, the good fatty, bad fatty. It's pervasive in our community, and it affects us. Those of us who are aware of these conversations, these philosophies. There are those individuals out there that are very against what is known as health at every size, and that is a belief in the civilian fat world, the fatosphere, as we call it, that this idea that you can be healthy at any size. And then there are those who are against that, and they're militantly against that. They they are organized, and they are vicious, and they are mean, and they attack anyone who tries to promote obesity by endorsing the health at every size philosophy. And I've seen them they've come after me, with my novel Fatism. I have been attacked by many of people for promoting obesity, for promoting health at every size, and viciously so. And attack meaning attacking me with negative reviews on my books, with calling me out on the site called Goodreads. And by the way, if you do ever go to Goodreads, which is where you rate books, if you can go to my my pages and give some good comments, because any pro supportive comments I can get to counteract these negative reviews for people who have clearly not read any of my work, but still try and do the ratings downward to make it seem like it is less worthy than it is. I would very much appreciate it, because the anti-fat people, they are out there, and they are coordinated. And I as a fat advocate, I do all I can to combat that part of society, which is, albeit a small part, but it's interesting to see how militantly these anti-fat individuals are out there in the world, and it's unfortunate, but it's the reality of the world we live in right now.
People have a lot of time on their hands and they decide to use it by just tearing down anything that they either don't like or they don't understand. And so what if you're promoting obesity? The amount of bullshit that people promote all goddamn day, people who get up, they have their own media outlets that they go on and they talk all kinds of bullshit. They may they could be a racist, they could be a white supremacist, they could be a KKK member, and they're out there promoting them damn selves. If I want to promote obesity, fuck you, I'm going to promote obesity. Big fucking deal. But in everything that we've been talking about, we've seen, or at least I should say, I've seen in my time in the community, I've seen like everything, like sort of from the early days of the internet to the point where now it's very popular to monetize your gains. And we've talked about the lack of mentorship and kind of the lack of community as we all become more connected and yet more isolated. What are some of the other things that you've seen progress since the 90s?
Well, I want to say community in general. I've seen how large our community is, and I'm not talking about body size. If for those individuals who have never been to, or even those who have been to, say, a bigger Vegas event, it is overwhelming to see how the fat community at large, taking over an entire hotel in Las Vegas, and everyone is there for the joy of fat. And there's no longer this ostracism that we've experienced in the past that I mentioned earlier. You can have any aspect of fat admiration, present. There's, gatherings, workshops, and there's so much less judgment than there has been. And I love seeing that. I love that environment where we really are more all welcomed. And I think that also has to do with the fact that there are more gainers and encouragers out there now than there ever has been. And maybe that's just because people are more, computer literate, that people are online more. People are finding communities when they're much younger. You're 12 years old on the internet now. And, I've had someone who has gotten to know me and he said, well, I started following you when I was 14. And I said, I'm glad you didn't reach out to me until you were 18. But it's still the fact that people know that there's a community, that the community is big. We are there in numbers and also in our poundage. But it's just to see that the size of our community growing and the camaraderie. I'm so thankful for that. I'm so happy that people now have outlets, whether it's a Grommr or, bigger Vegas, or all the different bear events. I mean, in Palm Springs this year alone, there's been like half a dozen fat boy events of one sort or another. And so I love to see that. And there's more of it now than there ever has been. And that makes me really happy that people can connect. And thank God for the internet for helping make that happen. It really has had a huge impact.
Phil, as we begin to come to the end of this incredible episode, I think we've got to leave off on the future. What are your goals for the future in your body, your profession, and within social justice?
Personally, for me, I think I have a few future goals that I would love to hit. I've wanted to get to the magic 500-pound mark, and I dream of about 600 and 700 pounds. Although, being part of our older community, I don't know how possible being, 60 and 700 pounds is going to be. But, there's still the drive. I think the journey yields its own rewards for many of us gainers. But more, always more, is something that I crave. I crave it, to my core being. And as for professionally, I'm looking to retire in the next couple of years from work, and that will actually, I think, not only help my gaining, but will also my writing. I'm currently working on a novel about the Mexican Revolution and the intersection with my family coming from Mexico. And that is a really, really big project. It's a total non-fat project, but it is quite a substantial piece. I've been researching for the last 15 years, interviews with my family. So that is something that I have ongoing and actively working on and writing, and it is a lot of fun, a lot of work, but it's a whole different vein, stepping outside of the fat world. And in terms of fat advocacy, I think just being here, being present, available to anyone that wants to reach out or that has already reached out, to be able to be a mentor to them as I can. I'm always happy to be here. I'm thankful to be alive. I'm thankful to have a voice, to be able to share whatever experience I have, institutional knowledge, as I mentioned. I'm grateful to be able to connect with people and to let people know that we have a history. We have a history as gainers and encouragers that goes back, that, so many of us fought, I wouldn't say fought so hard, but it's really just, being present and making space in our community to make it known that, in the face of adversity and an anti-fat world at large, that we can make these very fat safe spaces. And now people can thrive in those spaces. And I love seeing that. Fills my heart to see these young 25-year-old 600-pounders saying, I love every inch of my body. I love seeing that. And I see it more and more every day. And it makes me happy to see that is possible now.
You said it fills your heart, does it?
Absolutely.
Oh, wonderful. Phil, baby, this has been a pleasure. And listen, I know we've been meaning to get this on the books for a while, but I am so glad that we've gotten to have this conversation. I'm so excited for people to listen back to this. And just so y'all out there fucking know, children, if you don't know who your elder statesmen are, if you don't know who these people are, you're about to learn, because we need to do more of this. We need to have more of these conversations, because as you've just heard, there are people in our community who have run the gamut, and I understand the irony of running, waddle. They've waddled the gamut, they have. They've done it all, and they deserve their flowers, and this is what this series is going to be all about. So Phil, thank you. Above and beyond all things, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It has been an absolute pleasure, Tim and Jim. You are amazing, the work that you do, and I'm just grateful to be able to spend this time with you both.
Thank you, baby.
Thank you so much.
Where can listeners find you online?
People can find me. I have my indie publishing website, embonpointpublishing.com. Whichever means people want to find me.
Gorgeous. Well, listen, y'all, that brings us to the end of another fantastic week here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. Now, if you liked this episode, the podcast, our guest, or just us in general, please share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram at thiccymouse and Grommr at orpheus. You can also find us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or visit our website at podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you'd like to become a financial supporter of the show, you can donate through our PayPal account, and you can always email us at thiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
And bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Spotify podcast.
Artwork, media design, editing, and production by James Heinzen.
With original theme music by CYMK.